In this lesson, you are going to learn what a box and whisker plot is, how to create a box and whisker plot given a particular data set, and also how to read and interpret box and whisker plots. So let's begin with some definitions. A box and whisker plot shows the variability, that means how much things are changing, of a data set along a number line using the least value, or the smallest value, the greatest value, or the largest value, and what we call the quartiles of the data. Now think of the word quarter. Note that there are 4 quarters in $1, and each quarter is worth 25 cents. So a quartile represents 25% of the data. So these quartiles, of which there are 4, hence the name quartile, divide the data into 4 equal parts. The second quartile is also known as the median. That should be a familiar term. It's the middle of the data set when our data is written in numerical order. So Q2, or the second quartile, is also the middle of the data set. The first quartile, or Q1, is the median of the lower half of our data. And then Q3, or the third quartile, is the median of the upper half of our data. If we include the least value, the greatest value, Q1, Q2, and Q3, we have what we call the 5-number summary. So these 5 numbers that make up a box and whisker plot are known as the 5-number summary of the data set. The general idea is note that a box and whisker plot is a box of middles, or a box of medians. We find the median of the whole data set, the median of the lower half, and the median of the upper half, and that's how we make a box and whisker plot. Once we've created one, you'll notice that maybe you've seen, right here, you'll notice maybe you've seen a similar plot before. So the instructions here are to label the box and whisker plot below, that's this guy right here, with the following key terms: the least value, the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, the greatest value, the box, and the whisker. So let's start with the least value. That's this number that appears on the left-hand side, because we usually write our number line from least to greatest, which means that this dot over here would represent the greatest value. Note that the number line below doesn't include any actual numbers, but that doesn't matter for our particular exercise here. This could be 26, and maybe this is 2. Then the guy right in the middle is our median. It's represented by a vertical line, and it's also known as Q2. So it's the vertical line in the box there. As we make our box and whisker plots, and the next little bit, we'll actually have a dot there. Technically, it's best to then erase it and just draw a solid line, but it won't hurt to have a dot there. This guy to the left is the first quartile. So that line right there, that vertical line, marks the first quartile. Similar to the median, we'll actually have a dot right there when we make our plot, and that's totally fine. It's the first quartile, also known as Q1. Which means the upper guy there is the third quartile, also known as Q3. Lastly, let's label the box and whisker plot here with some general terms. Down here at the bottom, I just want you to label that the box. That's referring to this part right here is the box and everything inside of it. Let's make that a little clearer. So there's the box. And that means these little guys at the end here, just like a cat has, are called our whiskers. So there's a whisker extending from the least value to Q1. Then we have another whisker extending from Q3 to the greatest value. Note up here I said that there are 2 whiskers, and we've labeled 2. So that's generally what a box and whisker plot looks like, and kind of how to find some of the information from a box and whisker plot. So let's go through the steps of actually making a box and whisker plot. First, since we need to find a bunch of medians, we need the data in numerical order. So we usually like to write it in order from least to greatest. Once we've done that, we want to find the median, or the middle, of the entire data set. Sometimes that median lies between two values, which means we need to find the mean, right, of the two values. So find the mean of middle two values, which means adding them and dividing by 2 if we don't have a clear median. And we practiced that in lesson 7.1. Then, once we found the median of the entire data set, we're going to find the median of the lower half, which would be called Q1, or the first quartile. And then after that, we're going to find the median of the upper half, which will be called Q3, or the third quartile. Then we're going to draw a vertical line that include, or sorry, not a vertical line, a horizontal line. It's going to be a number line. I've given that to you on each of these problems that we're about to practice. But you're going to draw a number line that includes at least the least and greatest values. And I'd recommend, once you've found the least and greatest Q1, Q2, and Q3, kind of deciding how you're going to count on the number line, like if you're going to count by 1s, by 2s, by 5s. And that just kind of comes with practice. Once we've written out the number line and kind of put some values on the number line, we're going to graph the 5-number summary, but we're going to make sure that those dots are slightly above the number line, not on the number line. You'll see why when we go through an example. Then, using Q1 and Q3, we're going to draw a box. Okay, that's the box part of our box and whisker. We'll draw a line through the median, as we saw on the previous page. And then we'll draw our whiskers from the box, extending out to the least and greatest values. All right, once again, you can scroll up or turn the page and see the example on the previous page that we went through, looking at those whiskers extending to the least and the greatest value, and then that line going through the median in the middle of our box. So it says, make a box and whisker plot that represents the ages of the members of a backpacking expedition in the mountains. So note that step 1 is to take our data set and order the data from least to greatest. So that's what I'm going to do, is take my data set in order from least to greatest. As I scan along the entire data set, I notice that the number 18 appears to be the smallest. So that's what I'm going to lead with, is with 18. I also find it nice to kind of use pencil, so you can just cross off and then erase as you need to look at the data again. After 18, I see I have 2 22s. And I'll cross those off. Scanning along the data, I see a 24. I see 3 25-year-olds. Catch up on my crossing off. Cross, 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 and cross. Again, least to greatest. So the next largest value after 25 is, of course, 27. And then 28. Boom, boom. And then lastly, I see 3 30-year-olds. I'm going to leave those uncrossed since I know those are my very last values. Note that 30 is also the greatest value. So there's my data set rewritten in order. I always like to check and count. So let's count the original data and make sure it matches with the number that I have in my new data set. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we probably have the correct data set. Now looking at step 2, it says to find the median or the middle of the entire data set. So I'm going to use the crossing off method. So I cross off, upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. Oops. Note we ended up having 2 data values left, which means we need to find the mean or the average of the 2 that is left. Now, I know already in my head that if I try to find the middle of 25 and 25, it's still 25. But perhaps you don't know that, and that's okay. In which case, you would do 25 plus 25, press enter on your calculator before dividing by 2. Divide by 2 because that's how many values we have, and you find that the median is 25. Over here off to the side, I kind of want to note what each of my data values are that I'm going to be graphing my 5-number summary. So we just found Q2, or the median, which was 25. We're also going to find the least, the greatest, Q3, and Q1. Oops, let's put that there, Q3, and then our greatest value. Our least and greatest we've of course already found, so let me go ahead and add those. The greatest was 30, and the least was 18. Now, we're moving on to step 3. Find the median of the lower half, which will give us Q1. So starting with that blue bar, I'm looking at all of this data from 25 to my start of 18 to find the lower half, median of the lower half. So again, I'll cross off. If you're using the same color pencil, it might be hard to tell what you've crossed off, so I'd recommend starting to go the other direction. So notice how I make my diagonals the other direction. Ooh, once again, we're landing right in the middle of two values. You could just ask yourself in this particular case, what's halfway in between 22 and 24? And hopefully you've noticed that that's 23. But it never hurts to practice doing this math here just in case you get some nasty numbers. So 22 plus 24, then divided by 2 is going to get us 23. So Q1 is 23. Now let's move on to step 4, which is to find the median of the upper half, which will show us Q3. Now we're looking from here all the way to the end. Once again, I'd recommend starting to make your crossing off diagonal in a different direction. Once again, we landed in the middle. This should happen if it happened with the first median. It should happen with the median of the lower half and the upper half. Once again, it should actually be fairly easy to see that the middle, or halfway in between 28 and 30, is 29. But in case you don't see it and or to continue practicing, I'd add 28 and 30, then divide that value by 2 because that's how many numbers we have, and I'd get 29. So Q3, or my third quartile, is 29. Now, let's move to step 5, which is to draw a number line that includes the least and greatest values. You'll notice I already have a number line there, and my least value of 18 is already on the number line, and my greatest value of 30 is also on the number line. A recommendation, if you draw this number line yourself and write the numbers, I would personally put the numbers below the number line, not above. Because as you're going to see in a second, our box plot is actually going to appear above the number line. But that's okay the way it's been done. Now let's move to step 6, which is to graph the 5-number summary. So that means we're going to graph all 5 of these numbers that I see on the left-hand side. I'm just going to keep them color-coded. Note, I'm going to graph them not on the number line, so not there, and not like really close to the numbers, but probably somewhere in the middle. So right about here. So there is my least value. There is my greatest value. Notice I'm trying to do it right above the number. Well, not right above the numbers, but lined up with the numbers. Q1, 23 is halfway between 22 and 24, so that would be right there. Q2 is 25, once again, halfway in between. We just happen to get a lot of odd numbers on this one. And another odd number. Q3 is 29, which is halfway in between 28 and 30. So we have our 5-number summary. So far, this is probably the easiest part. What people struggle with the most is doing step 7, which is to draw the box using Q1 and Q3. So remember that Q1 is my pink dot right there, and Q3 is my purple dot right there. So those are going to form the edges of my box. So from there, I'm going to draw a large vertical line, making that pink dot and the purple dot be like halfway in that line. I'm going to connect the top parts and the bottom part. Now I've formed the box. So I've done the part that says draw a box. Then it says draw a line through the median. So let's draw a vertical line through the median there in the middle. I didn't want to make it blue because I don't want to overpower that blue dot there. And then lastly it says draw whiskers from the box, the least and the greatest values. So from Q1 down to the least, from Q3 up to the greatest. And that's how we draw a box and whisker plot to represent that particular data set. We'll talk a little more later about how to read that box and whisker plot. Here it says to make a box and whisker plot to represent the lengths in inches of cats. Again, step 1 is to take my data and order it from least to greatest. I'll notice the smallest number is 16, so let's start there. We have 16, I'll cross it off. Next I see 17, and then 18, and then 20, 21, 22, and 23. So boom, 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 boom. Of course, that leaves us with one number left, which is our greatest value, which is 25. Once again, I recommend checking and making sure that we have the same number of values as we originally started with. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not a one lost, hopefully. Once our data is written in order from least to greatest, we need to find the middle of the entire data set. So again, I'm going to use the crossing off method. Cross off, cross off, cross off, cross off, cross off, cross off. Once again, we have an even number of values, so we don't have an actual true middle. What we need to do instead is take those values. Sorry, we do have a true middle, just it's not a particular data value. So we take those two values and find the average of those two values, which means we add those and divide them by how many we have, which is 2. And we find that Q2, or a median, is 20.5. Or if you ask yourself what's halfway between 20 and 21, it's 20.5. Sorry, once again, off to the side here, I'm just going to make note of some of our points of interest, our 5-number summary. So we already found the least value. We just found Q2. We also need to find Q1 and Q3. And we, of course, earlier found the greatest value when we wrote it from least to greatest, which was 25. If you're having trouble finding those numbers, let me know. We'll do additional practice. Again, let's find Q1, which is the median of the lower half. So I'm looking at the lower half of my data. I'm going to use the cross-off method again and switch my diagonals. Boom, we ended up right in the middle again. 17 and 18 were left. So guess what? We're going to add those and divide them by 2, because that's how many we have. So we're finding the mean. Notice some of those concepts from our earlier lessons haven't gone away. Again, the middle is 17.5. So once again, we've got another half, which makes sense. Halfway between 17 and 18 is 17.5, or 17 and a half. Now let's find the median of the upper half. Again, I'm going to use the cross-off method, switching my diagonals. Boom, once again, we end up right in the middle of 2 data values. So I'm going to average them, or find their average, find the mean. That means we add and we divide by how many we have, which are 2 data values. And once again, we're going to get an interesting half, right? The halfway in between 22 and 23 is 22.5, or 22 and a half. Now I'm going to graph my 5-number summary, because I can kind of skip that step. Oh, was it 4 there? No, step 5, where I draw a number line. Okay, you can see my number line already includes the least and the greatest values. Boom, there's the least at 16, and the greatest all the way up at 25. Once again, remember that I'd much prefer for those numbers to appear below the line, but it's okay that they appear above. So there's my least value at 16. Now this is going to be tougher because I'm going to have a lot of in-betweeners here, even though I'm counting by ones, but it's because I have a lot of halves. So there's 17.5, there's 20.5. So just take care to note that, make sure that your halves are in the right spot, okay? Halfway between 22 and 23 should be above 22 but below 23, so not there, right? Because that would be 21.5. And then lastly, 25, my greatest value, right at the end. Okay, here comes the tough part. We're going to draw a box using Q1 and Q3. Remember, Q1 is pink and Q3 is purple. So I draw a vertical line through Q1, vertical line through Q3, connect them to form a box. You'll note that my lines are not perfectly straight. Using a ruler would really help you. Then I'm also going to draw a vertical line through my median, and then whiskers that extend from Q1 down to the least value, and from Q3 up to the greatest value. And once again, we've created a box and whisker plot representing that particular data set. Next, you're asked to make a box and whisker plot that represents the hours of TV watched. I kind of have the data set and my solution covered up right now. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause this video. Try to create a box and whisker plot from the data that you're given there. Once you've completed creating that box and whisker plot, going through all of the steps, I'd like you to go ahead and check your answer by continuing the video. And then after that, you may take a quick break. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video and actually practiced completing a box and whisker plot. I'm going to kind of erase some of my markings here, and you should end up with a plot that looks something like I have down here. I did note that I messed up a little bit on the number line and it ended at 5 when we needed to include our greatest value of 6. So I extended the number line just a little bit and noted my greatest value of 6 right there. But that's about what your box and whisker plot should look like. I should be able to see that you tried to, oops, that's the eraser. I should see that you tried to find the medians, the median of the whole set, the median of the lower half, and the median of the upper half. And then I should also see something like your 5-number summary here. I should see the numbers plot, the dots plotted there, and there. And then I should see, of course, a box and some whiskers, because that would make a box and whisker plot. And so that kind of reviewed, this will be video part 1, how to create a box and whisker plot, and talked about some general definitions.